it's the soil life and its metabolism that are the main players in all these processes, and we have to be conscious about that while acting in agriculture. So for instance, about soil life metabolic processes, in a natural ecosystem, you have the litter layer, and in this litter layer, you have the decomposition of the plant residues by not only the fungi and the bacteria, but also by the arthropods, and you get as such the conversion into humic substances. And then you have a completely different biology in the root environment, so in the rhizosphere, so near the plant roots, where the plant roots give their exudates, the plant gives its exudates to the microbiome in the rhizosphere. It stimulates this microbiology, and it's a symbiotic. It creates symbiotic association with the microlife in the rhizosphere. Important to get mineral nutrients. Then about carbon and the nitrogen cycle, the fate of soil organic matter, and it's indicated here, the soil organic matter, the fate of soil organic matter is to be decomposed. And it's decomposed in a well aerated soil by oxidation, and it's also a microbial process. So you get also from the decomposition, you get CO2, a certain amount of it's breathing fat. The soil is breath, so it's the microorganisms uses oxygen and are emitting CO2, and this CO2 is also part of the CO2 that the plant can use for its photosynthesis. And in the meanwhile, also nutrients are released, and you have the mineralization also of nitrogen. This nitrogen can be taken up by the plant, and so it works. But also you have also an opposite process, that mineral nitrogen that is not used by the plant, it will be used by the microorganisms, and then you have an immobilization of nitrogen. So in a healthy soil, you have these processes. You have this in a well aerated soils, and besides mineralization, you have immobilization, and your mineral nitrogen content will not be too high in that way. Then the soil organic matter, it's derived from fresh organic material. And the soil organic matter itself, it's about organic residues, it's about soil organisms, and it's also about protected organic compounds. And then I come to the story also, Chris also brought us. It's the theory of the soil continuum model, which focuses on the ability of decomposer organisms to access soil organic matter, and on the protection of organic matter from the decomposition provided by soil minerals. So it's not humic substances are not that what we assumed earlier, is high weight carbon compounds. There are still some that are very recalcitrant, but it's a continuum of different decomposition products from monomer, from biopolymere to monomere. So it starts with quite large molecules, and it goes down to smaller molecules, the monomere. But these organic carbon compounds can be protected by adsorption to mineral surfaces and also by incorporation into soil aggregates. So soil organic matter is the sum of plant and animal residues, microbial biomass, microbial necromass, and carbon compounds, these decomposition products that can be protected against decomposition by these mechanisms. So this is a completely other view on what is soil organic matter. Then the buildup of soil organic matter, it requires plant residues, and it requires also a certain carbon and a certain nitrogen input. You might have organic material from above ground plant part, but also from below ground plant part. And this is all on-site produced organic material. And the below ground plant parts are the roots and the root exudates, and they are quite important for the buildup of carbon. And you have the external input of organic material. This is the organic fertilization, like animal manure, compost, cut and carry fertilization, for example. But then is the question, which part of the organic material is most important for the soil organic matter buildup? Is it the on-site produced organic material, or is it the external input of organic material? Is it the above ground plant biomass, or is it the below ground plant biomass? And in a PhD study at ILVO from Goy, she found out for maize that the relative contribution of roots was on average 3.5 times more important than the contribution of shoots to build up soil organic carbon. So the root system is much more important than the above ground plant parts for the building of soil organic matter. There are a number of factors that are affecting soil organic matter persistence or carbon storage, and is the soil structure, because this also determines the aeration, but also the texture, because the textures is also means the amount of clay minerals in the soil that can protect soil organic matter by absorption from decomposition. Then you have the temperature and the moisture content for everyone well known. The soil life itself, which organisms are present to decompose the residues, and then the soil management, the tillage practices, the fertilization, the quality and the quantity, and also the cropping system itself. And the interactions among all these factors are complex and in some cases poorly understood. To which extent do we need fertilization, organic fertilization, for some buildup? We can say, no, we do not need it, or we need it much less in cropping systems with carbon sequestering crops. These are crops with a long-lasting growing period or a deep rooting system. And also when we have the leguminous crops, when we have the nitrogen input, we need the carbon and the nitrogen input to build soil organic matter. So we also, when we have an activated free living nitrogen fixing bacteria, when we have this all, we not especially need the organic fertilization for some soil organic matter buildup. So then it becomes clear why we need a diverse crop rotation for this soil organic matter buildup, but it's also important to prevent and control pests and diseases and weeds, and also to get a higher crop diversity in a diverse crop rotation also means a higher soil life diversity. So some built up by on-site production of organic matter material for restoration of soil quality. Then you have when you combine the more recalcitrant carbon-rich material. This is favorable for some building, but it has to be combined with an appropriate nitrogen input. And some building needs both carbon and nitrogen. And also the CN ratios of the residues will have an effect on the long-term accumulation of organic matter. So then these are excellent crop combinations to build organic matter. You have, for example, we tested also maize-bean combination at our agroecological experimental platform. And a triticale faba bean or a grass cloverswort in a ley farming system. These are all quite very favorable to build soil organic matter. So the maize legume cropping systems, they provide a good balance between legume nitrogen, rich material, and more recalcitrant maize stover. And this is about diversity of soil life. We had a strip cropping experiment at Inagro, which we studied concerning the rhizosphere microbial community. And in this experiment, we were growing 2 crops in a strip cropping system, leek and celeriac. They were alternated row by row, and then also as a monocrop leek and a monocrop celeriac. And we wonder if the microbial community in the rhizosphere of the leek would be affected by the celeriac. It was not the case. But what's sure was the case, and what's also already known, that each crop type will establish in its rhizosphere a specific microbial community due to a complex plant-soil life interaction. So that means also the more different crops you have in your system, the more diverse will be your soil life. Do we need organic fertilization for sufficient N availability? If we lack N availability from soil organic matter due to mineralization, at lower soil organic matter contents, and we have soils with low soil organic matter contents. So if we lack this N availability from some in a transition phase, we have to start to build up some by diversification of crop rotation, and we can use all improving organic fertilizers like compost and farmyard manure. However, if we excessively focus on fertilization to build soil organic matter and guarantee N supply, then we will end up with N losses and nutrient surpluses, and also imbalances and excesses. That's what we experience also in our Flemish context with the nitrate problem. We found by monitoring some experimental fields, we found out that there is a risk of a too high nitrogen mineralization potential due to very frequent supply of farmyard manure in quite, not in excessive amounts, but in the standard amounts that are permitted. We may compensate lack of N availability from soil organic matter by using fast N releasing organic or artificial fertilization for crops with a relatively high nitrogen demand, but we have to be very careful because we risk priming effect due to excessive mineral N input from fertilization. And the priming effect means, and I will show it you with this graph. So we did a survey of 28 fields with leek as a test crop, and in this graph you see the mineral nitrogen availability in the soil profile till 90 centimeter. It's in kilogram per hectare, and you see 3 sampling moments. So we sampled at the start of the cultivation period, before cultivation, before fertilization and tillage. We had the first sampling moment. We had a sampling moment, intermediate sampling moment in the middle of the growing season, at the time that the crop was not yet well developed, so a young crop. And we had a third sampling moment at the harvest. And you see there is an increase in mineral nitrogen in the profile due to the input of mineral nitrogen, but also due to mineralization. But you see that for the fields with a higher mineral nitrogen input, and this was still the time that the artificial fertilizer was not yet that expensive. So you see with this higher amount of mineral nitrogen, you see not only the increase is not only understood by this higher input, but also by extra mineralization and extra nitrogen, so extra nitrogen release from soil organic matter due to a high mineral nitrogen input. And this is the priming effect. And in the second half of the growing season, you have a decrease of the mineral nitrogen amount in the soil profile. Not only, and this decrease is higher than the uptake by the plant. So here you have an immobilization due to the the soil life, and probably due to the activated soil life in the rhizosphere. That's still a little bit a hypothesis, but we see this effect. So yeah, here you have, and this net immobilization, this was correlated with the microbial biomass assessed by the measurement of microbial carbon. So we went further with these fields with the leak crop in 2009, and we surveyed 31 fields for the residual mineral nitrogen. And besides by fertilization, it was clearly affected by agronomic practices and growing season. So you see here the mineral nitrogen in the topsoil, in the arable layer, and here the nitrate N residue, and that's the amount of nitrate nitrogen in the soil profile up till 90 centimeter. And you see that on farms with livestock, we had higher amounts of mineral nitrogen in the soil profile at the end of the growing season, possibly by a higher use of a higher input of animal manure or nitrogen fertilization as a whole. The growing season has an effect, but we saw also that regular soil quality improving practices as farmyard manure, compost, and cover crop reduced the risk of too high nitrate residue. So we had lower if we used this soil quality improving practices, we had higher residual nitrogen. It's still high, but it was lower. Then this is a fertilization trial we have at ILVO. It's still going on at this moment. It's also in the frame of Agromix, but also it was also in the frame of another project where we had a rotation and where we applied repeatedly either farmyard manure compost. It's a little bit yeah, this was farmyard manure compost. It was and we compared it with farmyard manure co-composted with material from nature reserve. And this was the first application in 2019. And these are the mineral nitrogen amounts in the soil profile, also till 90 centimeter at the end of the growing season. After application here of the compost and the farmyard manure, and we see a little bit, yeah, it's higher, but it's not significantly higher mineral nitrogen amounts due to fertilization. So we can say that the input of organic material with a high carbon to nitrogen ratio or stabilized carbon is key for improving soil quality, and it doesn't imply a risk for too high residual mineral nitrogen. So you might have an increase in the residual mineral nitrogen, but it's a minor increase and not really a risk to for environment. In another project, in the Enoptima project, we also did follow up 30 fields, farmers' fields, where we have had a look to the effect of the base fertilization on the nitrogen yield. So here in this graph, you see the nitrogen yield of the fertilized plots plotted against the nitrogen yield of the non-fertilized plots. And this is expressed in kilogram per hectare. And you see all the dots that are on the line of under the line. It means that the fertilization did not improve the N uptake. So with fertilization, you had a lower N uptake than without fertilization. So this base fertilization in this cropping system, it was mainly farmyard manure and compost, didn't really work that well for this point. So sometimes the fertilization from soil improving fertilizers may counteract the yield. That's also a little bit, this is also the reason I would say that it might be a better practice to apply the soil improving fertilization in the autumn and not in the spring. We also know that cover crops that are left a long period in the field up to maturity leads to increased carbon to N ratios in the organic material, and this is very positive for the long-term buildup of soil organic matter. It's also in natural ecosystems that the litter material arrives in autumn on top of the soil. So then that's the time the leaves fall. We had a mulching experiment. We applied mulch. It was a mixture of wood chips and grasses in spring to grow a maize bean crop, and with the idea, yeah, it will be a dry season and it will be good to keep the moisture in the soil. But we got a very wet season, and this mulch layer counteracted the development and the emergence of the maize bean crop in these wet conditions. So also here it was better to have added this mulch in autumn than in spring. Why would we till the soil? Yeah, I think there are just two reasons that we till the soil. It's for seed or plant bed preparation, or it's also to enable to remediate soil compaction, for enabling rooting, to have a favorable soil condition for rooting. So if we can prevent compaction, we already can, we don't do have to relieve it. So we have just to prepare our seed bed. We did some trials about non-inversion tillage compared to conventional tillage, and conventional tillage is with moldboard plowing, and reduced tillage was done by this device, an ActiSol, to release soil compaction in the arable layer. And we have had a look after 3 years. It was in a conventional vegetable cropping system with these 3 consequent crops, and we saw this stratification of soil organic matter in the soil profile. So you see that in a reduced tillage system, you get a higher carbon content and in the upper layer compared 0 to 10 compared to the 10 to 30 centimeter layer. This is a stratification, but in a conventional system, you have a lower carbon content in the upper layer, and you don't have here a higher carbon content in the second layer. So here you are gaining in carbon storage, and this was already significant after 3 years. What we also saw in this system that the mineral nitrogen was the same in the soil profile, but it was higher in the soil profile. So it was more situated in the top layers. So also more, it was also more enabling the crops, the following crops, to take up that nitrogen, mineral nitrogen. And there was also less nutrient leaching, less leaching of base minerals like calcium, magnesium, and kalium in the reduced tillage system. Then we had also a look into the functional groups of the soil food web, more specifically the microorganisms, the bacteria and the fungi and the actinomycetes. They are also very important in the soil food web, especially the fungi. When you miss the fungi, you miss a very large part of the soil food web. And we saw that in a reduced tillage system, that this system stimulates the growth of the most group of the microorganisms compared to the conventional tilled system. This was also significant after 3 years. In another trial, it was in a conventional arable cropping system. After 3 years, where we compared also the reduced tillage with the conventional tillage by moldboard plowing. Is the BOPAC trial at ILVO. It's still existing. It still lasts. We see that the aggregates in the top layer were more stable in the reduced tillage system. It was done by the dry and wet sieving method, and using this method, you had plowing causes more aggregates in the smallest size, which meant that overall the aggregates in the plowed treatment are less stable. Then this is another monitoring of the soil food web based on the looking at the nematode community. And the nematode community is a very complex community. You have different types of nematodes. You have nematodes that are, you can categorize them regarding the feeding type. You can categorize them regarding their life cycle. But then from that, you can have two indices. One index is the enrichment index. It's about nutrient richness. And another index is about structure index. It's about completeness of the soil food web. And in all agricultural soils, you have a quite nutrient-rich environment. So all these agricultural fields are situated in the two upper quadrants. But when you see there is much a higher variation regarding the structure index and the two fields that have the highest structure index, so also the most complete soil food web, was one field there was applied lay farming, so the this is with temporary grassland and arable land, and another field was an organic farm. Why would we? Another question: why would we incorporate above ground plant part? Have we any reasons to do so? Soil life can help us to incorporate this organic material by these organisms, and incorporation in natural ecosystems is done like that. So by detrivorous organisms. Though when we do it in agriculture, incorporation of above ground plant parts, is it positive for carbon sequestering or either neutral, or it might be negative due to the soil tillage? This is a research question. When we don't incorporate our residues, we have to use more specialized, innovative sowing machines and planting machines. We are experimenting with these machines in our experimental ecological agroecological platform at Hansbeke. And here, a complex multi-species cover crop mixture was rolled down by the roller crimper, and then with this sowing machine, we could perfectly sow the wheat afterward. So some recommendations to farmers with respect to regenerative soil management, about crop rotation, increase crop diversity by larger crop rotation, but also mixed cropping systems. For example, agroforestry with arable crops, intercropping, multi-species cover crop mixtures, and include the leguminous species. Reduce the soil tillage and apply non-inversion tillage methods. And regarding fertilization, apply yearly carbon-rich soil improving organic fertilization, preferably late summer or autumn, following by a cover crop, and do not surpass nutrients export by input from fertilization, unless a structural nutrient lack or imbalance. And for the policymakers, soil care should be reflected in regulations concerning environmental issues, and the regulation should not compromise soil quality enhancement, but should facilitate cultivation measures that contribute to a good overall soil quality, and support research that delivers insights in soil functioning in relation to soil management practices, and create market conditions that reward farmers for healthy food products derived from healthy soils. And we had, till now, we had a planned living lab, but since we are at ILVO, we have a soil team, and we are working already 20 years about soil. We have now a plant and soil living lab. So you can contact us for all kinds of stuff. These are the references on which I based my presentation. You can find it out further, and acknowledgements for my colleagues, but also the partners in the project. in the project and the funding bodies, and last but not least, the farmers community. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Koen, for this presentation, the recipes of how to increase carbon in the soil. I have a first question. No? Were you okay? I saw you first. What's your question?
Yeah, it's a short question this time. Koen, thanks a lot for a wonderful presentation. I'm stuck with one question after everything you've showed. Can we, if we have the right type of rotations and the right cover crops and green manures, can we fertilize without animal manures?
Yes, I think indeed we can. We had also a multi-year field trial where we 4-year rotation on 2 fields, where we compared fertilization with farmyard manure. That was with conventional tillage, compared with plant-based compost with reduced tillage, and we had better effect on soil quality, and we had the same yields. But in a certain year, we had even higher yield in potato because we had a much faster emergence and youth development of the potato crop in the reduced tillage system with the compost. So we can without animal manure, but I can also animal manure. It's an addition. It's a quality as well. You have not to see it as a quality in a quantitative way, but animal manure can be also give an extra quality. But also it also introduces a certain microbiology, so it can be part of your fertilization as well.
Okay. Other questions, remarks, additions? Yes, Anton, coming forward. And I give you the microphone. Okay, off you go.
Ja, Koen, ik doe het even in het Nederlands. Of is dat lastig?
Okay. Go on.
It's easy.
We will translate.
I think that if you add earth, I tried it. If you add earth to the manure, you get a complete different type of manure. Farmyard manure, as I showed in my presentation, is in fact not the good manure. If the same farmyard manure is treated by adding earth to it, it's a complete different story. And I think that's knowledge of farmers in the 19th century. And still in the Netherlands, there are some farmers who do it. And then you see less losses of nitrate and better yields if you do that.
Okay, did you understand at the back of the audience there? It's about the qualities of manure, adding earth, a mineral substance to manure gives another quality and a better quality. That's what Anton says. Do you agree?
I can agree. I can also say, yeah, farmyard manure is also very reactive. Slurry is more reactive even, but also farmyard manure is reactive. We have stored farmyard manure for 2 months, and we were losing 40% of the nitrogen just by storage.
And that was emission.
Emission. This is emission. And therefore, we advise, and we also do this trial of farmyard manure and farmyard manure compost. We try to say we have to store the farmyard manure not on itself. We have to combine it with plant material to compost it. And in that way, when we have a good composting process and we manage to have a good process, we manage also to reduce the nitrogen losses by volatilization. But yeah, putting earth, it's a little bit, perhaps a little bit the same idea to reduce the emissions.
The idea is that the earth particles bind the nitrogen and the phosphate in a better way than straw does. Yeah. So you keep much more nitrogen in your farmyard manure or in your compost. And the interesting thing is, when Pfeiffer did this in the 30s, the worms came spontaneously into the heap.
Okay, I try to summarize. The idea is that when mixing the manure with earth, for example, with then you have a fixation of the nitrogen. It does not escape in the air, and it stays into the fertilizer. That's what you say. Okay. Next question. Everything was clear. Koen, so we go to the next speaker already. Jeroen?